Welcome to Celebrate a Sister podcast. I'm your host, Emma Walkinshaw. I'm a transformational coach. I'm also the founder of Embody Me program and the creator of 21 Minutes of Morning Magic. You may also find me on the yoga mat leading yoga sessions and also running retreats here in Australia and internationally. Here on the podcast, I bring you some pretty incredible guests. We talk all things self-belief, body acceptance, personal development, outdated beauty standards, and we also call BS on the toxic diet culture, accepting the beautiful bodies we were born into, letting go of all the beliefs, and raising our self-awareness. I also come to you from time to time with a little solo episode, a little life according to Emma moment. I'm so glad you're here. Enjoy. On this week's podcast, I bring you Dr. Lucy from Real Life Medicine. Dr. Lucy is passionate about health. She's passionate about women's health and women who have tried every diet under the sun. She helps women optimize their health and achieve long-lasting weight loss by improving and managing their mindset, reducing the effects of chronic illness so they can have more energy, more confidence, and stop living life on the sidelines. Dr. Lucy describes her own experience. She was an expert dieter and an emotional eater. Unfortunately, Dr. Lucy developed obesity, fatty liver, and pre-diabetes. As you can imagine, Dr. Lucy was mortified because she is a medical doctor. But now she has moved away from old, outdated habits, completely abandoning traditional dieting, and now embraces a real food lifestyle. Dr. Lucy runs her online holistic health and weight programs with her colleague, Dr. Mary Barson. They have helped thousands of women reclaim their health. They are both very real and relatable and embody the name Real Life Medicine. I bring to you this week's guest. Welcome, Dr. Lucy.
Oh, Em, thanks so much for having me. It's an honour to be on your podcast.
Oh, I loved our chat. You joined me for the Body Love Revolution Summit earlier on this year, and that was such a wonderful chat. We could have chatted all day, and I thought, come back on and let's talk a little bit more about the whole journey of, your whole ethos around real food, real life, and women who are in perimenopause or menopause and having a busy life, and how all different facets of well-being. It's not just one thing. Like we've discussed in the past, it's not just one thing about losing the weight and I'll be happy.
Yeah.
There's so many other facets to it. So I do want to ask about the mindset that you see working with lots of women, the mindset that you see. And I know that you've spoken about your own transformation from an expert yo-yo dieter to embracing the real food lifestyle. Can you share the mindset shifts that you believe are critical on the journey of well-being and cultivating more of a wellness ethos?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm a child of the dieting era, as lots of us are. And so I thought the only way to lose weight was to go on a diet. So I'd go on a diet and it'd be pretty hard, but I'd be just white-knuckling my way through. But always at the back of my mind was this little thing about, oh, goody, when the diet's finished, I'll be able to stop. And so there was this, and usually what would happen is I'd have an endpoint, an event, my wedding, somebody else's wedding, a 21st, whatever it was. There was always this end point, and I'd get to there and I'd have this goal. And so I'd do whatever it took to get to this end point. But always this idea of, it'll be hard, but it'll be short. And it'll be worth it. And, all of that language that, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. And the whole thing was it was all about getting thin enough for something, to look good in the photos or to, I don't know. Really, when I think about that now, it's I think something that probably all young women certainly have is that idea that the thinner you are, the more acceptable you are. Yeah. And so, like everybody, I fell into that trap and honestly modeled somewhat by my mum, who was also a dieting queen. And, we'd all sit down to dinner and she'd be eating some diet food. So, so I would always, start the diet, I'd go and buy the diet food, and it'd be all the, the diet yogurts, all the diet stuff. And then when I finished the diet, I didn't buy any diet food. I just then back to my Maltesers. So consequently, it was a bit like this, a bender. So I was either perfect, rigid, hardly eating anything. Yes, losing weight, thinking I was awesome and very virtuous in that. So there was this sort of halo about how holy I was, versus then on a bender and then a little bit of shame about how disgusting I was for just scoffing all the things. So, that guilt virtue cycle, along with the, eating nothing to eating everything in sight cycle. And doing lots of things like people do and still do, which is, I'm going on a diet. So you quickly eat everything like the Last Supper to, just to, have your last meal, like, I don't know, like you're going, I guess it is that thing, they used to have eat, drink, and to be merry, for tomorrow we die. And then there was that little joke where they put a T on the top of it. And it was that you have to quickly eat everything because you're about to go into this period of complete deprivation.
Yeah.
So, just all of those sorts of things. And I was really, really good at being perfect, I have really good willpower, really good discipline. So perfectionism was one of my strengths, but it also meant that I had so if I wasn't on a diet, then I was the opposite. So, it was, and I think over time, what I've realized, well, and again, I guess, like lots of us, well, I found myself at the age of, nearly 50, heavier than ever before, heavier than when I was even 13 months pregnant, not actually an elephant. 9 months pregnant, and I put on 30 kilos in my pregnancies. So I was an easy weight gainer. And here I was heavier than that. And you know what, though? I actually gave up. I gave up and just said to myself, well, it doesn't matter. My husband still loves me, and that's important. And I'll just buy big pants and, and that's fine. Elastic pants are my friend. And at some level, I can still make peace with that concept, except I also had some metabolic health issues going on. So I had developed pre-diabetes and fatty liver, and I was tired and I was a bit sluggish and I was often hungry and I just wasn't thriving. So it was that, that I'm sort of going, So, I just sort of vaguely knew I had to do something.
Yeah. And I totally resonate with what you're saying then, going, make peace with where you're at. Yeah. It's okay. Elastic pants are my friend, and I can... And some part of that I really love, that we can make peace with where we're at. However, I often say that little Miss Sidelines steps in, which is you don't actually then participate in life because you're a bit sluggish. So if you're then not fully living your life, let alone the health concerns, then you've got to, I guess, really look inside yourself and say, what is it? And then shifting that mindset from famine or feast. Shifting that mindset, I'm either on or I'm off. I either get to be a really great perfectionist and do it well, like you mentioned, or I abandon my perfectionist and just, go for it. But that's the mind shift that I think is really the work. Is making peace with not having to be the perfectionist and get it right all the time, but also being really conscious when you are stopping your life and accepting the bigger elastic pants. Like it's got to be somewhere in the middle, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that is actually where the magic happens, because I think, where we like to be perfect, because perfection, it's encouraged in our society, it's rewarded, and as high achieving women, we get praised for our achievements. And so you want to achieve, and, we become achievement or results driven rather than process driven. And so I don't care how I lose the weight as long as I lose it. I don't care if I'm eating diet yogurt that tastes disgusting, but it's going to make me thin, so that's all right. That all of those sorts of mind sets in there. And because also, like in some ways, by letting go of perfection, again, in my mind, if I'm not perfect, then I'm half-assing it, and I'm not a half-asser. So why would I do that?
Yes.
So it's like, So, yeah, the big shift comes when you realize that actually you don't have to be perfect to get whatever results that you want to be, that you want to have. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be consistent, but it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yes.
They're the difference.
Yes, consistent. And even if we think about consistency too, we can still be consistent and not do it to the full, because that's the other thing too, like that perfectionism thing. Consistent feels very different to perfection. Even just feeling into that when you say that. Consistent means maybe I didn't do my perfect thing, which was walk for an hour today, but maybe I was consistent. I just walked for 15 or 30 minutes or whatever that shift is. But that's a great mindset shift from perfectionism to consistent. It just feels like that next little notch down that is still incredibly helpful for the mindset, but not damaging. Yes,
correct. So when I do a talk on, it's change behavior, which is, well known science, and there's a very well established change behavior model, which maybe many of your listeners will know about, which is that pre-contemplation contemplation model, but in my mind, I actually don't like that model because so I've sort of reworked it, because pre-contemplation, it's a stupid word. Like, it's the time before you're thinking about changing. But in actual fact, particularly for women, most women are acutely aware of their body. They're acutely aware of what they're doing, whether it's helpful or unhelpful, but they're not always ready to accept it or face it or deal with it. And so rather than calling that pre-contemplation, I just sort of call it hiding, which is where you go and you don't want to know. Yes. And so I've got this little picture that I have, which is a tiny, skinny little tree, and there's a bear hiding behind it, hoping that no one will see him. And it's a bit like that when we do that, because we go there because it's really safe for our brain. We don't have to change. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to let go of any of our tools, our crutches. So, food for a lot of us is a crutch. It makes us feel good. It's soothing. It's all of those things. We don't have to change any of that if we're hiding. But it's also the time where sometimes some of the health stuff happens with our bodies. Yeah. And so, we're using tools that perhaps don't serve us. They're, and again, this is not about being thin or fat or whatever. This is about thinking about, well, and again, I'm always talking about the lovely liver, looking after your lovely liver, because when we do stuff, the liver has to work really hard to fix it. Yeah. And so it's about giving the liver a rest and looking after your pancreas and kind of talking about your collective, like your organs, like they're little, collective children that you're in charge of looking after. Yeah. And so when you come out of hiding, the next phase in the usual change behavior model is contemplation, which is sort of when you're thinking about changing. And again, nobody I know who, as a woman who's aware of their body, just goes into this, oh, look, maybe I'll lose a bit of weight one day. They're not doing that. They go in there and they suddenly go, oh, my God, I've got to do something. This is terrible. And they realise that there's this stuff going on, and they feel then bad that they've been hiding, and they've, maybe they've lost weight and they've put it all back on, and maybe they, managed to get control of their blood pressure and now it's not. And so then you get a bit cross with yourself and you go, oh, I can't believe it. And so we use that phrase, look what I've done to myself. I can't believe I let myself go. And it's all this judgment and self-blame. Yeah. When honestly, all we were doing was using a tool that served us well at one time and perhaps is no longer serving us as well as it could. Yeah.
That's a nice mindset shift from that beating up and thinking, because I also know that when you almost catch a reflection of yourself in the mirror, or you get a reflection of the bear behind the very skinny tree.
Yeah.
And it's that, what have I done to myself? And then the desperation, which could propel you back into go and buy everything diet, and then we starve ourselves. Like that's where the pendulum can swing. But I feel like at some point you have to say, I'm too smart and I'm too old for this. I know myself. There's at some point where you say that is the outdated behavior and very much the outdated diet culture thing, or we'll just whip you into shape now. So we go straight into, let's deprive you and malnourish you, and we'll just whip you. But you get to that point where you're almost like, oh, that old chestnut. We've been down this road too many times. We know too much, and we know ourselves.
Yes.
So that's the other little bit, which is potentially, do you think it could be, I want to ask you about the body acceptance part of that, because many people do struggle with accepting their body where they're at. And that's wants us to get into that desperation and that drastic measures, which is whatever that looks like, the shakes, the cabbage soup diet, the rice diet,
all of that stuff.
all of that business.
Yeah.
So if someone is in that place, especially if they're in a larger body, how do you approach the topic of body acceptance with your clients? And what advice do you give to them to make peace with where they're at, but know that they're still going to take action because they're in that place of made the decision, but without being drastic or dramatic?
Yeah. So I love to tell this little story that I've got about whippets. So I talk about a lady, and I don't know, let's call her Samantha or Sam. So Sam's got a dog, and she comes home one night and she notices the dog's is limping a bit, and he's just looking a bit, he's just not thriving. His coat's a bit dull, his eyes are sad. She thinks, oh, it's been a bit of a while. I'll take him to the vet for a checkup. So she goes to the vet, and the vet, does his examination and all of those sorts of things, and goes, look, he's not in optimal health here. He's really, as you pointed out, his eyes are dull, his coat's dull. Yeah, he's probably, he's a bit overweight for a dog. And, what are you feeding him? And she kind of goes, oh, well, yeah, look, I've been a bit slack, I've been busy. And so, I've just got whatever the cheapest canned food I could find was. And I haven't really had time to take him for a walk. And I know, look, I probably haven't even patted him very much. So she feels a bit bad at first. And so she, on the way home, drives by and buys some fancy lead and collar. And she gets home, and, that night she takes the dog for a walk, but she doesn't flog him. She just takes him to the end of the driveway and back, because he's still a bit ginger and he's a bit sore, and, she's bought the good food and she's giving him a pat every night. And over time, she's, improved his food, and she's each day she takes him, and it's a little bit more, and it's a bit past the letterbox, and it's a bit, and then to the end of the street. And look, after a couple of weeks, the dog's looking better. He's wagging his tail. He's much happier. Then she goes to the park, and suddenly the dog's running. She can't believe it. He hasn't run for yonks, and now he's catching frisbees, and his eyes are bright, and his tail's wagging. And the thing about this lady and her dog was she looked after him because she loved this dog. She never looked at the dog and said, you know what, I wish you were like next door's dog that just takes itself for a walk. And I wish you were like the dog across the road that just, is a whippet. Why do I have to have the fat, overweight dog? She never said that, because no one would say that. We just love the dog. Mm-hmm. And so I say to people, this is what, your body is the dog. You love it and you care for it, and then it will get better. Yeah. It doesn't mean, you don't need to transform yourself into a different dog. You don't need to be a whippet. Nobody does. I mean, it's so interesting, isn't it, when you think about humans, how many different breeds of dogs have we got? How many different shapes? How many different sizes? There is a dog for every person. And yet in the human, we have glorified the whippet phenotype as being the only acceptable dog body.
Yeah.
And that's nuts.
No, I've got cavoodles and a moodle and I adore them.
Yeah,
It's,
exactly.
it's that, isn't it?
Isn't it? So it's really about that. And so, yes, so this lady accepts her dog. She loves the dog. That's why she wants to care for it so that it's thriving, not so she can change it.
Mm. And I also love the bit in that story too. Slowly back to the word consistent, just to the
Yeah.
letterbox. Next day, a little bit further, and then we're at the park, and then and that's that consistent message again. We don't get out and get the dog and go, right, we're flogging you, we're going around the oval 10 times
Yeah.
because we're whipping you into shape, which is what we often do to ourselves when we
Yes.
lean to that dramatic and we I don't know what I'm speaking for myself here.
Oh,
What
yeah, yeah,
happens?
no,
You have
no.
this brain fart and you're like, right.
Oh,
You
because you know
sort it
what, though,
out.
again, thinking about the language that's in our society, how common is the good kick up the pants phrase?
Yeah.
All I need is a good kick up the pants. Basically, we're saying all we need to is to be, yes, whipped into shape, kick up the pants.
Yeah.
And so we do it thinking that that is somehow going to motivate us. But can you imagine if this lady came home and just yelled at her dog for eating so much food? Like, you wouldn't.
No, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
No. You imagine if she yelled, like he'd be scared of her. He wouldn't want to be going for a walk with her. He wouldn't be happy. So, yeah, it doesn't work. We think it does, but it doesn't.
So leading into that, it doesn't work. We don't need to be harsh with ourselves. So I would say the opposite to that is self-compassion. Would you say
Yeah.
self-compassion? So if you were to talk about self-compassion in real life medicine's
Yeah.
methodology,
Yes.
how could someone practice self-compassion, particularly around nourishment, movement, and maybe if they've got some health concerns that or some messaging that they've just received and
Yeah.
there's not a lot of compassion
No,
for
no.
yourself. How do we encourage that or how do we practice that?
Yeah. So I think the first thing to note is that it can take some time. So, I mean, I like to describe a thought like from a neurophysiology point of view, a thought is just a connection between two nerve cells in your brain. If you've thought that thought a lot, it'll be quite a deep seated thought. It's a bit like a rut in the road. It's quite deep. And so it is, and it can be so deep that it's almost automatic that you may not even notice that it just flies in there. That the first thing that happens is you go, oh God, you're such an idiot. And we all can do that without recognizing it. But the thing is, of course, we listen to ourselves. So if we say we're an idiot, if we say we're hopeless, if we say we're stupid, we believe it. So the first thing is just, I guess, bringing some awareness to your thoughts and recognizing, oh, like a lot of people don't even notice how harshly they speak to themselves. And going, oh, and again, because we can then judge ourselves for being harsh, we go, oh my God, I'm so mean to myself. I'm such a bad person. I'm so terrible. It's like, okay, how about we just, my little standard line is, isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that I talk like that all the time? Because that can then bring, which I know you talk a lot about, is that curiosity. You're curious rather than judgmental.
Yeah.
And so you're going to find that you don't suddenly become compassionate within a day. That's not going to happen. But it's something that you cultivate, that you grow, that you spend some time learning, and then it becomes your second nature. So, your thoughts are often like your standard operating system. And what you're wanting to do is create a new operating system that becomes soon your standard one. And that there's a changeover as that happens. And basically what you're, again, thinking about the dog, how do people speak to their dogs? In general, most people love on their dog. Oh, you're such a good boy, so cute, blah, blah. And if we're trying to teach the dog something, we praise it. We don't yell at it. If you're trying to teach the dog to sit, you go sit and you push the bottom down and then you bang on. Oh, my God, good boy, good boy, good boy. You don't go, knew you couldn't do it, bloody hopeless, useless dog. Like you just don't do that.
That's what I was just thinking. That analogy is powerful of the dog, with particularly with this self-compassion thing, thinking about how we treat our dogs and how we treat ourselves,
Yeah.
and the reward that we do to our dogs when they
And
have,
they get it right. Yes.
yeah, or when they've gone for a little walk. Well done, that was a bit. Or they swim in the ocean, and just, after we take the dogs down the beach all the time, and just watching them gives me so much joy.
Yeah, because they're
And
just happy and
they're happy, and that's almost like embodying just like the dog, instead of
yeah,
us, well, I'll speak, get down the beach and like, oh, bloody hell, I've got to take my dress off now and get in the water. The dog doesn't care. In it goes.
yeah, exactly. But I think the trap for some people is there's two things. They don't want to practice self-compassion because they think it's a hall pass, and they're letting themselves off the hook, whatever that means. But that's their thought process. But the second thing also is it isn't a hall pass. So you don't say to yourself, I'm just going to eat the 25 donuts because I'm being kind to myself.
No.
That's kind of a misguided view of self-compassion. It's more about this idea that if you haven't lived up to your expectations, let's say you made a plan, and this is how you want to eat for the day, and for whatever reason something goes awry, then rather than beating yourself up on it or deciding that, you're hopeless, it's never going to work, so you just go and scoff everything, you don't tend to do that. It's more about, okay, and, the way I chat to myself now is, that's not exactly what we wanted to do, Luce. What's going on for us?
Yes.
And it's like much kinder. It doesn't mean that you just give up, but you bring yourself back and ask what's going on.
And like you say, self-compassion isn't letting yourself off the hook, or it's not a hall pass. It's actually a beautiful self-inquiry.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about intuitive eating, that principle? Do you feel like that has a place in this world?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. With one caveat. It's extremely hard to eat ultra-processed food intuitively because it's designed to override those.
Yes.
So I would practice what I now would call intuitive eating. I eat whole foods. I don't weigh, measure, track, calculate anything. I try to eat when I'm hungry, and if I'm not hungry, I don't have to eat. Like, just because it's lunchtime, if I'm not actually hungry, I could just wait. Like, there's no rule that says, well, it's 12 o'clock, you have to eat. And I'm going, oh, I'm not actually hungry. And I think that's it. There's those sort of, again, that thing of, we've got conditioning around times in which you have to eat.
Yeah.
Conditioning around times in which, and then if you don't eat, everyone's going, oh my God, what's wrong with you? And you're like, well, actually, and I just kind of, again, I think about, I've got a horse out in that paddock. I'm looking at my window. I've got a horse in our paddock. And I don't reckon he thinks at all about how much grass he's eaten for the day. No. He's not there counting his blades. He's not weighing. I've had a bit too much clover today. Like, he's just eating, and when he's full, he just stops.
Yeah. And I love that caveat, because that is so a missing part of the intuitive bit. Absolutely. Because when we've got companies that, and we talked about this on the summit, companies that have designed food to literally make it moreish.
Yeah.
And that stuff going off in our brain that wild horses couldn't stop you.
Yeah.
You have to put a lock on the cupboard.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think it's tricky because there's again, it's the messaging all over the place. But
yeah,
and I'm a big fan of, there's no good food or bad food, except there actually kind of is.
Yeah.
Because it's very similar to the alcohol message. And I mean, I drink alcohol. I drink a glass of wine here and there, or a gin and tonic every now and then. But I can regulate alcohol really easily. So if I don't have it for a night, I'm not, raiding the fridge wishing I had a glass of wine. It's not that I'm holy or virtuous. It just is something that is easy for me. But there is nothing healthful, despite whatever the grape growers of France might want to tell you. There's nothing healthful about alcohol. And it's the same with ultra processed food. There is nothing that is healthful about it. Now, if you have the ability to regulate it easily, then fine. You're the boss of you. You can do whatever you like. But me personally, I find certain components. The savoury is much easier for me. If I had a couple of chips, I couldn't care less about chips. Have a chip and then I'd forget about them. But sweet processed food for me is really hard to regulate. And once I start, I find it very hard to stop. And I used to think that was just me being weak, undisciplined and useless. And, I can't be like everyone else who seems to be able to have, half a Mars bar and not worry about the rest of it. Whereas, I'd have one Mars bar and wolf it down and then want another one and, and interestingly, I didn't even realise that there's biochemistry in this. And apart from the ultra processing of the food to make it hyper palatable, there is a part of the sugar process. So standard sugar, which is, to get a bit nerdy, is one part glucose, one part fructose. And when we have fructose, particularly in that very refined way, it acts on our brain to increase foraging, which was a very helpful process when we lived in the wild and there was fruit and honey around. Then obviously our bodies wanted to, or our brain and our survival instinct, it was good. It was like, oh my God, this is this quick thing, quick gorge it because we've got to last the winter. But we don't need that anymore because we invented refrigerators. And so there is no need to forage. But if you've ever had that, have you had that drive where you just, again, you're rummaging around?
Yes.
I used to call it sniffing around.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't even that long ago that I went to a conference and this guy presented his paper on this foraging behaviour. And I just went, oh my God, that's me. I'm a forager.
And you keep hanging off the fridge door and the cupboard door when you've looked at it 10 times.
Yeah. Just keep going. And so, and again, I'm sure, again, because humans are, complex and we're all a bit different. I'm sure there are people who don't get that foraging behaviour with fructose, but I do. And that explains to me now why sweet stuff for me is so hard to regulate. And it's not about good or bad or weak or strong. It's just knowing myself well.
Yeah. And knowing that, I love that correlation that you've just made even around alcohol and food, because I'd almost put them in two different camps.
Yeah.
But it's not.
No.
It's not.
It's the same.
And that's a great shift. Like you talking through that, then I was like, that is a great way to look at these things, because I certainly wouldn't be right now pouring a glass of wine on a Monday at 1 o'clock in the day or whatever, but I'd have a Mars bar.
Yeah.
But they're almost in the same in terms of what it does to us and the unhelpfulness in our body. Yet I'd never looked at it like that.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And in fact, yes, they both do, they both cause harm. The processing, the particularly excess sugar, they both cause fatty liver disease. It's interesting. I would say the processed food is even more harmful because it snuck its way into our day early on, like Cocoa Pops. We feed it to the kids. Nobody's giving their kids a glass of wine at 8 o'clock in the morning.
No.
But we are feeding them Cocoa Pops or sneaky ones that, like Crunchy Nut cornflakes, which sort of sound, like they're sort of healthy. But they're not. They're not.
Or even poor quality muesli bars or poor quality. I don't know, is there good quality? There potentially could be good quality muesli bars, but almost the packaging, the foods that package that go into lunch boxes, because everyone's busy, and this isn't, anyone listening to say that, oh, you're terrible. You're not. But it's the sneakiness of it. Yeah. And we feel we are doing good because this is what we've been advertising and the messaging we've got, and we've trusted it. We've trusted that we are actually taking care of our family or ourselves, when it's not always the case.
No. And And the ultra processed food industry is really sneaky because it presents something that is actually not really food, but it's dressed up as food. And essentially we've been tricked. And again, I hold no judgment to anybody that, you know, I fed all my kids ultra processed food. I didn't know. I mean, to the point these days that bread that you buy in the supermarket is an ultra processed product. And I thought, oh, come on, it's bread. But when you look at the level, you know, the ingredients and all of these things, and we're realizing now that they are harmful. So, yeah, you know, again, people go, I don't want to demonize it. And it's not about that. It honestly isn't. But we've got parts of our community that over 80% of their diet is ultra processed food. And so, you know, for those people, that food is harmful.
Yeah. And then from a health perspective, it does become, and you might be fine in your 30s, 40s, but as we age, all of those things, like you mentioned, the blood pressure and the diabetes and the fatty liver and all of these other things, that's not fun.
No,
that's not fun at all. But
no.
And
we have a tsunami of chronic disease coming our way. I mean, we're already entrenched in it. You know, it's not that long ago that I was in hospitals, and it's exhausting and feels unfixable, but it's going to get worse. And, you know, again, and so we don't want to be looking at dieting and weight loss just so that we can have a thigh gap or I want people to feel comfortable, but that comfort is not about measuring up to society's expectations and glorification of thinness.
Yes.
That's
Yeah, because like you said, everyone can be a different dog in a different shape. Not everyone's meant to have the thigh gap. Not everyone's meant to have the slender thighs or we're all different. However, it's problematic when we're uncomfortable in ourselves or we've got these things we're limping around. Metaphorically, we're limping around because you can still have a little bit of weight on you. Wouldn't you agree? You can still
absolutely. We do not need to be, and honestly, we don't even need to be whatever this ridiculous healthy BMI is.
Yeah.
That was, you know, coined looking at men. So it was men back in the 1800s, like Anglo-Saxon men. So it doesn't take into account women, doesn't take into account now we're all, you know, bigger bones, bigger everything. Doesn't take into account any of that.
Yeah.
No, and the interesting thing is that actually as far as health goes, you are more likely to be healthy if your BMI is between 26 and 30 than it is if it's between 20 and 25. The only caveat on that 26 to 30 is that sometimes people in that category are actually moving into the 30 to 35 to 40, and obviously all sorts of things start going on then. But we need to be normalizing this. You know, it's perfectly fine. I mean, I don't, you know, I'm not going to ever be a bikini model. I don't want to be a bikini model. I'll never be a bikini model. I don't need to be a bikini model. Unless they're happy to have bikini models of normal women, in which case I'm the poster girl of that.
Yes.
As are you, Em. As are all of us. Dr. Mary, you know, again, Mary is not a thin woman. We're not thin. We don't need to be thin. And I guess, you know, now I'm sort of getting my gander up because I see a lot of people promoting weight loss programs or health programs, and they use their thin body as their advertising material. And they're in their tiny bikini or they're a bloke with their top off showing their ripped abs. And honestly, and they'll say to you, oh, no, I work hard, that's why I look like that. No, actually, genetically, you might do some work, but everybody can work. Lots of people can be working the same as you and they're not going to look like you.
This is true.
You know, you're the whippet and I'm the Labrador.
Yes.
And
This
that's
is
okay.
yes, this is exactly right. I will agree with that, because how is that? And you see that in families. You can have siblings that one is just a little bit more like a whippet and the other one's like the Labrador. And you can say, but how is this? And but it's just how it is. And these people then are naturally more like, exactly like you're saying, their genetic disposition is more like that. And then they promote and say, here I am doing this. And then it feels very unattainable for the Labrador. Then the Labrador thinks, well, because not everyone needs to be that.
We need to be Labradors, absolutely. What we want to be is a healthy Labrador.
Yeah.
Okay? So we want to be a healthy Labrador. And I mean, I think that's wonderful. And I mean, you're right. You can see in families, and I mean that all comes down to genetics, and it's all down to the genetics of people's insulin resistance. So some people are more susceptible to insulin resistance than others, and you have two people with exactly the same lifestyle, but one person is, and in particular, the processed food and the sugars and starches and all of those are more likely for their body to store fat than the other person. And that's all it is. But again, our society is really vicious at shaming them and thinking it's their fault when it's not.
No. So, yeah, like you say, everyone just needs to have their own level of health. And I think, the measuring your energy and feeling like you can move freely in your body and all of those other markers are what we should be measuring, not necessarily, like you say, our thigh gap or our whatever, because not everyone's going to have that.
No, we have this little phrase where we tell our people they're hotties, they're healthy on the inside.
Love it. Hotties healthy on the inside. Yes. Like you say, what was it? Lovely liver.
Yes,
if your liver is lovely,
and I think when you are healthy on the inside, when your hormones, your metabolic hormones are all functioning well, your liver's functioning well, it's not full of, it doesn't have visceral fat all around it and all of those sorts of things, you look healthy. Like you have that glow. Your eyes are shining. You're like the dog. Your hair's healthy. It's all of that. That's what we want.
Yeah, that's what we want.
Yeah.
Dr. Lucy, I want to say thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I've had the mindset shift today, those beautiful little bits of information that you give and your messaging around the self-compassion and self-care as opposed to beating ourselves up. That is so helpful. And all of the women listening, no doubt, they will be having some little aha moments too.
Good.
So thank you, Dr. Lucy. And for anyone who wants to follow Dr. Lucy and Dr. Mary on Real Life Medicine, all of the links will be in the show below. Have you got anything coming up at the moment, Dr. Lucy? What have you got happening in the next couple of months?
So our next round of the 12-week Mind Body Rebalance is in May. And, again, that's our program where we look at these metabolic hormones that I was talking about. They're the ones that we want to get in balance, hence the balance bit of it. So that's the body balance, getting your metabolic hormones functioning well so that you're thriving, your eyes are bright, like your dog, you're wagging your tail. And then the mind part of it is all this mindset stuff and basically undoing and unlearning diet culture, relearning ways in which you can support yourself and understand yourself so that you can do this, not just for 12 weeks. It's not a 12-week challenge. It's you can do it forever and love it, like not feel miserable.
Yeah. And your word for today, being able to be committed to it and not that perfectionism behavior.
Absolutely. We do that all the time because people, it's a bit like going to the gym. If you miss the gym once, nothing happens. If you miss it twice, nothing happens. If you miss it 3 times, you'll probably never go again. So you do need to get that consistency going just because that's how you get results, and that's how you look after yourself.
Like the dog walking to the letterbox, get into the park, same thing.
Yeah. And when you stop caring, your dog gets sick.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lucy.
You're welcome.
All the little links will be in the show notes. So anyone who wants to join Dr. Lucy and Dr. Mary, please do. You'll enjoy that 12-week program with all the information. But thanks again.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me, Em. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. How do you start your mornings? Do you wake and check social media and your emails straight away? Do you look at your to-do list? I have a very simple morning ritual hack called 21 Minutes of Morning Magic. I do this in a virtual group on Facebook a couple of mornings a week, so you are welcome to join me. That's the accountability piece. The other bit about this beautiful morning practice is it's so simple. 7 minutes of yoga, 7 minutes of meditation, and 7 minutes of flowetry. I've also written an accompanying book which has a theme each morning and a mantra. It's called 365 Days of Morning Magic. So if you are keen to join me and need someone to practice with in the morning, I am your spiritual jogging partner. Check out the link in the show notes.